Hello, everybody. Thank you, Sujun, for the introduction. We have only 25 minutes or so I will try to give a very mini introduction about myself. I'm at the University of Greenwich. I'm an associate professor there, head of the Cyber Risk Lab, and my research is mainly about applying optimization to a number of cybersecurity problems that we face these days. Trying to be fairly practical as a result, due to a requirement of a research project we participate, but keeping these mathematical, if you like, foundations there, so that we solve some security problems, as I will present today. So I want you to see this presentation today as an introduction, and only introduction. It could be many more other complex things we could discuss if we had more than 30 minutes, but please feel free to email me after the talk, and we could even have a separate meeting, if you like, to discuss and see how all these ideas could be useful for your PhD or for your research in general. So with this, just to go to the outline of the presentation, I will show you one slide to how my research looks like in the form of a sketch. And then we're going to discuss three things very briefly. So robust defenses against an adversary who is strategic, i.e. he knows what or she knows details of our system, and they are planning very well, as we'll describe later. Then allocating security resources to actually create these robust defenses, and one of them could be, let's say, money. All right, so invest in cybersecurity controls. And then at the end, we have what I call here cybersecurity games in the form of strategies between a defender and attacker, as I will discuss later. So my research, very briefly, you can find obviously my papers online and what projects I'm leading. So basically, I have a part of research which looks at threats and risks and how we can mitigate this kind of impact expected to take place within our organization. For example, I have particular interest in small businesses, and I'm steering my research towards this, having a software that I'm developing for hopefully some commercial endeavor in the near future. And then on the right-hand side, you can see some side topics within this decision-making, if you like, field, which is related to intrusion detection. You had a great presentation earlier. Adversarial machine learning to some extent, and game theory and optimization has been the main vehicle into generating and creating papers in this field. And then we have a new project on protecting the home users against threats on their AI devices, let's say, Amazon Echo. I will skip details about the projects so that we stay within the time frame. A motivational slide could be nothing else apart from what you see here, a massive increase in the data breaches within the last years. It seems that pandemic has made the situation worse. Many people connect to their businesses from home, where the attack surface is different. And I think this slide wouldn't be massively different even without COVID-19 there. I think cyber becomes such a prominent topic, and this is so evident also from the latest cybersecurity, the national cybersecurity strategy, where basically our discipline now becomes a profession in the UK, approved by the Queen also eventually. So that's an interesting number here. A ransomware attack happens every 14 seconds. If you are in the keynote in the morning, Andrew said that cyber insurers are denying underwriting clients for ransomware attacks, showing how prominent this problem is. And as a result of that, companies have to basically protect themselves in ways that they can keep their assets, even if they're not covered by cyber insurance. So what kind of attacks we can face? Let's say in an abstract way, we have either commodity attacks, where basically the hacker is finding tools, techniques, openly available on the internet, and fairly simple to use. One of them I have here is ransomware as a service. And then we have what we call APT, the advanced persistent threats. But basically, the attacker is more of a specialist and they want to allocate basically quite a lot of resources to strategically approach the organization and finally attack. And probably following, let's say, for example, the MITRE attack framework as a very good example of modeling advanced persistent threats. Now, what is difficult there? What are the challenges for us? One is to understand their strategies, right? The other, which is not actually here, but just came to my mind, is that we don't know that they're part of our organization. So they get in the systems, they hide themselves for several days, on many occasions, exfiltrating data, for example, and also getting some data, actionable data, excuse me, is not easily, is not an easy task, right? So I don't see how organizations will share, let's say, their intrusion detection system logs with other organizations. It would be fantastic to have a threat hub, you know, and everybody to contribute to that, and basically organizations to learn from each other. But this goes back to the MSSPs. So I think it's not really a job of a small business or any other business to know the details of these attacks. So how do we support them? And I will start with this part of the presentation, where basically we want to see the robust defenses, and robust in the sense of how can we really maximize the chances to deny the threat coming in, or if you like, minimize our risk, same thing. So if you put in place some purely static measures, let's say, for example, you implement the Cyber Essentials, okay? And if you haven't heard of that, Cyber Essentials is a scheme that basically you can implement the minimum requirements for security controls. That's great and absolutely necessary. But besides this, the attackers change. Therefore, we have to change. We have to update our strategies. Some of these strategies must be updated anyway. Take, for example, what I have here, patching our systems. But some other times, we really need to take action. And in order to take action, either we may go and pay some expensive consultants, or having our own, let's say, chief information security officer, or having an automated decision support system like the one I envision to basically support our decisions even on a daily basis, but in general, during the next long period of investing in cybersecurity controls. So the attacker changes, the defender has to change, and it starts looking as a game between the attacker who changed, and it's not obviously one attacker, it's the entire threat landscape, and the defender who actually can be in very different positions depending on the organization. They may be very knowledgeable, may have a great budget to invest, or the situation could be exactly the opposite, and they're in need for support. So there is a fundamental relationship between security and decision making. And that goes without saying that the situation turns up to be in many other problems. But here, what we have is a situation where the attacker generates some risk to the defender, which, if we don't mitigate it, if we don't invest in mitigating this risk, you actually may end up with a very different balance sheet in your business, as opposed to the case where you have look how to prevent it. So basically, it doesn't generate profit to companies, and at the same time, however, at the same time, it saves the business from collapsing. Now, why I take this approach? I know you're all PhD students, because we end up looking at practical problems where basically we say, can I really apply all these maths in this situation? Can I create a software, for example, that can really give advice to businesses or to individuals? This is where we have to find the optimal way to balance the risks and to allocate resources at the same time, so that we end up with a very good utility, as we call, in terms of more formal, if you like, expression. So we have these theoretic models at the system level. And when I say theoretic, for example, the MITRE ATT&CK framework, right? You can say it's a framework that we can apply for an APT, but we know nothing else about, for example, how an organization can mitigate the framework, the steps of the attacker coming from the framework, for instance, by paying money. What kind of controls they have? The framework itself has mitigations, but how can we implement these mitigations? And at the end of the day, it looks that there must be a person that makes decisions about all of these things. And who is this person? Obviously, is the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, or the head of security or security manager, hundreds of different titles probably for the same job, must look after the systems. And what they usually do, they go online, they may go to, let's say, the Garden's Magic Quadrant, find what controls are available for a particular problem they have, talking to their colleagues also, trying to find out what another organization did in the same case, let's say, the same business, probably has to be in the same business sector. And they make decisions and they buy security controls and then they come to implement them, and all this vast number of steps required to happen before us as end users get to be secure. So basically, you have this human expertise that is required in decision making. And what is this based on? It's based on intuition and years of experience. I would call it, at the end of the day, gut feeling. As I'm interacting with them, I'm interacting with a number of CISOs, and some friends of mine are leading the security of organizations, and it's really experience and gut feeling. What is the best decision at the time? Three things that I have here: strategic decisions about resource allocation. Intrusion detection is part of that, and is a more specialized area of decisions. And incident response. What do we do when bad things happen to our organization? Now, what is the optimal way of doing that? Let's move on so we can catch up with the time. Shortcomings of the human expertise. So a business have a CISO costing them 150,000 probably, more or less. I'm just giving an example here. However, there are some things that they cannot do by default. And this is where the element of, we can say, the element of artificial intelligence can come in. And I will present you at the end how everything comes together and why I call this presentation today AI-driven decision making. So we have the scale, we have a lot of systems. We have to, for example, do some vulnerability scanning. You have a lot of, a lot of systems to basically to record, starting from the asset management, coming down to vulnerability assessment, and all the other steps that the CISO will do. The scale can be massive, not in a small business, to be fair, but in a large organization, it's really complex. Then you have the availability and the cost of good experts. So obviously, it goes without saying that depending on your budget, you may not even afford to get an expert looking after your systems. You can get an IT person, obviously, but obviously the skills are different. And time scale, they have to take an immediate response. So all these three, I feel that can contribute towards motivating us to create a decision support system and even to do research, as I have done in my work, and publish some impactful publications. So what are the challenges? Some kind of put everything together here. Allocation of limited resources, whatever the resource is. One of them could be money. For instance, in the intrusion detection, just to give you an idea so that you don't think that it's about security economics only here. In the intrusion detection, you have the expert has to go through the logs and decide which alerts to investigate further, so that they can really narrow down the possibility to detect the threat, or the system itself. Actually, if it's not an expert, usually is an analyst, but a team of analysts, the SOC team, but could be the software itself. So which alerts should we prioritize? There's a massive number of alerts, and you can get really the problem of false positives, that the previous speaker was talking about, to really harm the whole operation of the team simply because of that. So how do we allocate analysts, if you like, to alert, or which alerts to investigate, right? So This comes with a number of tools we can use, and there is whole literature on that. And then we have the informed responses. What do we do really when something has gone bad? So we have the preemptive and the proactive and preemptive, actually the preemptive and the reactive control. So the preemptive is before, and they come under the allocation of limited resources, so allocating cybersecurity controls to defend the organization. And then we have the reactive controls, which is after the incident has taken place. And I think these are the main two challenges of an organization, and also challenges that have been investigated in the literature. Now, the objective here is to finally have a framework based on quantitative metrics that decides about a number of things. Okay, and every area can generate a number of research papers, if you like, or a number of software components for a platform that can be used in the industry. What the tools are? So the tools, I would say first, it is artificial intelligence, because you have this automated decision making, and you want to simulate the security experts for sure if you want to replace them. And an example could be, like a virtual CISO that takes decisions, not in the form that is obviously given by the industry right now, but in the form of a software. Have machine learning. Definitely machine learning if you want your decisions to be really updated from the historical data that an organization may have, right? Otherwise, you just work. I think otherwise we just do maths, no? So I think machine learning is important in a realistic setup. And finally, optimization. And if you have heard of this tool from economics, the game theory tool, can be used to model situations where basically defender and attacker have to choose what they're doing, and based on what they're doing, they get some rewards. I have a slide on that. Now, I'll go a bit faster. So basically, this part of the slides called allocation of limited resources, which is something I mentioned earlier, and is motivating the fact that organizations invest in security more and more every year. And this is a number I got from a median report, 7.3% rising per year. And then you have around 57 security products to be the average number of products used by organizations. Think of any products that they implement, let's say the 10 steps to cybersecurity, or the CIS controls, on the NIST framework, or any other framework you wish. And some of them, 26% actually, have more than 70 products. I think this comes down to having overlapping controls, comes down to paying more than you should, and at the end of the day, even reducing the efficacy of our security posture. There's a number of articles also that discuss this problem, industrial problem. Now, the other thing is that do these organizations really know the worst security risk? That's a key question. So I would say that there's currently no science of security, it's just a cliche expression, but I think the point is that this is a practical field, right? Cybersecurity is a field where basically you require the experts to basically, it's like I would say, wouldn't mind saying that it's like medical science. You have a doctor to tell you what to do, and obviously probably you have experience with that. They even argue, if you have two doctors, they may argue what the best approach is, but it seems kind of similar with cybersecurity. And for example, how can we invest a budget? Okay, so how much security the organization can afford, but how much also security they need. So challenges that we have while we're deciding about this, let's say, security controls here is, what is the efficacy of security? How do we measure, okay, I will install, let's say, firewall. How efficient is it? How many of the attacks will stop? And the other is, how much will it cost, not just in terms of money, but also in terms of, for example, to have some indirect costs, for example, how will affect the usability of the whole business. and many other things that we discuss for hours. So I would say that this is probably the biggest challenge I will face if we go down and do research on that. And whenever we publish papers in this field, we come across the challenge of creating an appealing use case where basically the reviewer will say, oh, why this is low and this is high in terms of, let's say, efficacy of a control. And one can go and find papers in the literature where basically they have investigated this specific thing, I don't know, access control for IoT devices, and they say we have different levels of access control and this is more costly. This is not really trivial. And this is where basically creating a use case for a publication here could be challenging. And this is also interesting for us, since it can then have some really good rewards. Okay. I believe you have heard this term, security economics, and it's a whole field of research started from University of Cambridge and Ross Anderson, and basically it looks at having utilities for different different organizations, for example, in investing in security, in controls, all right? So you measure basically the cost and the benefits the organization will get from investing in security. Very briefly, here, I have only few minutes left, and I'll leave 2-3 minutes for questions. So what is game theory, which is something I would like to expand further. I'll give you the very basic concept. So basically, any situation that we have decision makers taking actions about doing something, yes, it is as generic as it sounds, can use game theory. Now, coming to security, let's say we can abstract the environment and we'll have a defender and an attacker. And defender can be anything. It could be a number of organizations coming together, if you like, if you want to see this more innovative case, or having a number of attackers coming together. But in general, is a defending and attacking agent. It could be as small as a system closing on or opening a port. Okay, so it's an abstract problem we have here, and we have to narrow down everything so that we solve a specific security problem. What do we have there? Players, outcomes, and actions. So taking an action will lead to an outcome. What is the difference with optimization? In optimization, I am alone, I take an action, I receive my outcome. That's all. In game theory, I take an action, then the other player takes an action, and then we collect our outcome. Or we take our actions, blindly, without knowing what each other does. Serially, blindly, number of different games. They are for a number of different problems we can model. We can actually model everything, if you like. So strategies or actions could be security controls versus attack steps. And what would be attack steps? I talk about controls earlier. Attack steps could be some TTPs coming from the MITRE framework. And finally, we have the notion of the solution of the game, which is the best we can do as defenders to protect our systems by implementing what we call here the Nash equilibrium. So which control should I implement? Now, as you guess, and I will probably stop here, as you guess, all these things are as good as the model we create, as the data we give as input, as the concepts we want to narrate in the paper. And finally, we need to compare what we did with against other solutions that they don't use optimization or don't use game theory, and they're still realistic, and we should compare so that we show the benefit of our mechanisms. I think, Sujun, I will stop here because we ran out a bit of time, and I'm happy to share my slides with the students.
How many slides do you have? I think I think your talk has a bit flavor of a more like tutorial, and so maybe questions should be offline because it's more about sort of guideline of how to study things. I'm happy for you to continue to finish it.
Okay.
Actually.
Yeah. It's almost done. I had some extra slides anyway.
Yeah. Please do finish it, because I think that actually helps.
Sure. Yes. So what you can see as automated decisions here could be reconfiguring security policies, for example, or allocating limit resources on the fly. How do we do patching every week? That's another headache that businesses have. How should they prioritize patching their systems? What I want to show you here before we go is this figure here that brings everything together. So cyber incident data, a security model that we have created as researchers, and then a number of things that go to the game theoretic reasoning, including using machine learning on the data. Why do we need machine learning? How do I know which, let's say, action is more likely to happen? Because it's not just an abstract notion where we say, okay, the attacker will choose one of the MITRE attack TTPs. What should I do? There's another question there. How likely is the attacker to use this TTP? How prominent was last year in my industry? So it's really a very complex problem. If you open this kind of research field there, you will identify so many challenges. For most of them, it's very hard to get data, let alone actual values. And I think this is where we're working with my PhD students, and we try to make a difference in this field by having some interesting use cases. Okay, I'm happy to talk offline, as I said earlier. These are some references I have used, and these are my contact details. To stay in touch, I'll be very happy to talk to you offline. We can set up a Teams meeting and talk for a while if you like, to see how I can maybe I can advise you for your PhD. Obviously, I'm happy to do that.